Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this. Have you ever stopped to think about just how incredibly fast technology moves compared to the rules that are actually supposed to govern it? It's a huge mismatch. Today, we're exploring a seriously fascinating clash, the collision between our ancient, physical legal systems and the completely new, rapidly expanding digital frontier of the metaverse.
So, picture this. If your avatar commits a crime in a virtual world, let's say the theft of a highly valuable digital asset or even severe virtual harassment, who exactly goes to jail? Does your physical body get locked up in a real-world cell for the actions of your digital counterpart? The stakes here are incredibly high, and as we'll see, our current physical legal institutions are desperately struggling to answer wild hypotheticals exactly like this one. And that brings us to the core tension of the research we're unpacking today. We are looking at a largely unregulated frontier. Technology is literally sprinting forward at warp speed, while the law is left limping behind. You know, law, by its very nature, is reactive. It waits for reality to happen and then adapts. But in the digital era, reality is being coded and rewritten daily by private companies. That creates this massive, ever-widening gap between what is technologically possible and what is legally protected. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start by unpacking the metaverse. Then we'll look at the historical sprint of technology outpacing the law. Next up, the wild west of avatars and digital assets. Fourth, the real human impact. And finally, strategies for regulating these virtual worlds.
Let's start with Section 1, Unpacking the Metaverse, Beyond the Hype.
Now, I know it's incredibly easy to dismiss the metaverse. People often brush it off as just a glorified video game, a passing fad, or just slick corporate marketing. But researchers Joxerramon Bengoetxea Caballero and Roberto Leopoldo Cruz Balbuena argue that doing so ignores a massive shift in our society. Their socio-legal perspective is absolutely vital here. Why? Because they aren't just looking at computer code. They're looking at how this code fundamentally reshapes human society, our most basic rights, and our institutions of law.
So how do we actually define this space? Well, the researchers define it as an immersive, multidimensional online environment with decentralized jurisdiction. But here's the kicker. So the crucial point is right at the end there. Users are represented by avatars with socioeconomic ties to the real world. These avatars aren't just pixels on a screen. They carry real cultural and economic weight. They can buy property, they interact socially, and they generate real wealth. Moving on to Section 2, Technology Outpacing the Law, a Historical Sprint.
It's really important to remember that technological disruption of the legal system isn't exactly a new thing. The law has always played this frantic game of catch-up. Back in the 11th century, finding old Roman law texts sparked the birth of the modern university in Bologna. In the 15th century, Gutenberg's printing press completely democratized legal knowledge. Jump to the 20th century and Web 1.0 and 2.0 decentralized how we produce information. But Web 3.0 and the metaverse? That is a completely unprecedented challenge. We aren't just decentralizing information anymore, we're decentralizing the actual infrastructure, the economy, and the jurisdiction itself.
This leads us to a fundamental mismatch, captured perfectly by this striking quote from the source research: "Law is semantic, computing is syntactic." Think about it. Law is entirely about meaning, nuance, context, and human intention. Computing, on the other hand, is driven entirely by binary data, rules, and syntax. This creates a deeply asymmetrical relationship. Machines can process rules incredibly fast, sure, but without ever truly understanding human meaning or justice.
Which brings us to a rather chilling question posed by the digital era. Can slot machine judges give us the law just by being fed the facts? I mean, if we rely purely on algorithms to enforce rules in the metaverse, we strip away all the human nuance of justice. The researchers point to real-world failures to illustrate this danger, like the Compass algorithm in the US. It attempted to predict criminal recidivism, but ended up relying on horribly flawed, biased data. We simply cannot feed facts into a machine and expect true, equitable justice to magically pop out.
That brings us to Section 3, Avatars and Digital Assets, the Wild West of Property.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly where the metaverse shatters our traditional legal concepts of ownership. Traditional property is tangible, right? You hold it, you possess it, you lock it in a safe. But metaverse property, it is entirely made up of intangible cryptocurrencies, NFTs, and digital licenses. You don't possess a physical object. You hold a cryptographic key. Or honestly, sometimes worse, you just hold a temporary license granted to you by a private platform.
Think about this terrifying reality for a second.
If you spend real, hard-earned money or highly valuable cryptocurrency to buy a digital house, what happens if the platform hosting that universe simply goes offline? Or what if they ban your account because of some misunderstood algorithmic moderation? Because your ownership is often just a temporary license entirely tied to their corporate servers, your valuable assets could literally vanish overnight. Poof, gone.
And it's not just property. Our legal concept of a person is also breaking down here. How on earth do we enforce sexual harassment or assault laws in immersive virtual reality? If an avatar commits a crime, like we asked earlier, does that link back to human imprisonment? And what about life and death? If a physical person dies, can their avatar be resuscitated or operated by someone else entirely? The law simply does not know yet if an avatar's existence and liabilities are permanently tethered to the physical person sitting behind the keyboard.
Let's look at Section 4, the human impact, algorithms, and the cyber radiant. We actually have to pull our focus away from the shiny virtual avatars for a moment and look at the physical humans who are bearing the cost of this immense technological leap. The seamless digital experiences we enjoy often hide a really harsh reality. For example, a recent investigation revealed that Kenyan workers were paid less than $2 an hour to filter highly toxic and traumatic data just to make platforms like ChatGPT safe for the general public. This directly grounds the abstract concept of AI development in very real, tangible human exploitation. Now, what's really interesting about this quote from sociologists Burrell and Fourcade is how perfectly it captures this growing societal divide. They write, "Beneath the fetish of artificial intelligence, a digital coding elite is exploiting a cyber teriad. We have this highly individualized, totally invisible class of digital laborers working in precarious conditions in the global south. They're the ones actually building the automation that concentrates immense wealth into the hands of a tiny tech elite." Just look at the real-world harm that is already happening. In the Netherlands, the entire government collapsed over a scandal where a flawed algorithm wrongly accused thousands of families of tax fraud. Meanwhile, in the US, predictive algorithms continue to automate oppression against marginalized groups. And over in Australia, automated welfare surveillance aggressively targeted vulnerable populations. The human cost of unregulated algorithms is already massive, and the metaverse is only going to amplify this. Which leads us to our final section, regulating the virtual world, choosing our future. So how do we actually prevent these algorithmic harms from multiplying in a fully immersive metaverse? Well, we need massive structural solutions. The authors of our source research issue a really stark warning here. We absolutely cannot afford inaction. They are calling for an urgent, unified approach to creating a solid legal framework. We need a new jurisdiction that actually protects personal data, human dignity, and property rights before the technology completely escapes our democratic control.
Let's move to these options and see how this builds. Jurisdictions generally face a menu of 4 regulatory strategies: top-down democratic regulation, co-regulation with big tech, provider self-regulation, or full laissez-faire, which is basically no rules at all. The authors strongly note the extreme risk of relying purely on self-regulation. Doing so deeply fragments the law and leaves users entirely at the mercy of private corporate interests rather than protecting their fundamental human rights.
To achieve the right balance, we need everyone at the table. We urgently need interdisciplinary collaboration. If we leave the construction of the metaverse solely to private agents, investors, and software engineers, we risk losing our fundamental human rights. We need sociologists, psychologists, and legal scholars working right alongside technologists to ensure these new digital spaces actually serve humanity rather than exploit it. As we wrap up today, I want you to consider this deeply provocative thought inspired by Yuval Harari's Homo Deus, a concept heavily discussed in the research. As technology increasingly grants us what honestly feel like divine abilities of creation in these virtual spaces, will you be the architect of this new digital world or the one left behind? The laws we demand today will determine exactly who gets to build the future and who gets permanently trapped in its code. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the rules of your reality.